This happened 3 weeks ago, and I'm still processing it. A bit of background first. I'm 34, single, and I've lived in the same town as my family my whole life. My dad, Raphael, is 58, works in construction, and has always acted like he knows best. My brother Blake is 31, married with 2 kids, and works at the same company as Dad. My Aunt Denise, Dad's sister, is 52, never had kids, and always has opinions about everyone else's choices. We have regular Sunday dinners, birthday get-togethers. The usual family routine. I've always felt different from them. Their values are traditional. Marry young, have kids, buy a house, stick with the same job for decades. I took community college, work in IT support, rent downtown, and I'm not married with kids. I assumed they didn't understand my choices, but I thought that was normal family friction. 3 weeks ago, Dad asked me to help clean the garage before his birthday party, because Mom wanted everything organized for relatives. I agreed, thinking it would be a few hours on Saturday morning. While I moved boxes, Dad went inside to take a call. He left the phone on speaker. The kitchen window was open, and his voice carried right to where I was. Something in his tone made me stop. He was on the phone with Blake, Denise, and my cousin Seth. They were talking about me. Blake mentioned I'd shown up early and Dad laughed. Except it wasn't a friendly laugh. He called me that worthless son, said I'd never be a real man, and that I was only useful for carrying boxes like cheap labor. I stood there with a box of Christmas decorations, frozen. Denise added a cutting remark. At least he still thinks we want him around. Blake snorted and compared me to showing up starving for scraps of love like a dog. Each line hit me, but I stayed and listened to see how deep this went. Dad said he'd told everyone I was their family failure project. The joke that never ends. Seth, someone whose moves I'd helped with twice this year, laughed that I was 34 and still sweeping like a janitor. They all laughed. My cousin laughed. I smiled and kept organizing boxes. I didn't react, didn't look up, just finished the job like nothing happened. When Dad came back out 20 minutes later and patted my shoulder, thanked me, it was as if nothing had occurred. But I wasn't shocked. I'd long suspected they looked down on me. Family dinners often had comments about when I'd settle down, get a real job, or stop disappointing them. I learned to tune it out, joke it away, change the subject. I assumed it was family pressure. Hearing them call me their failure project crossed a line I hadn't known existed. The fact they discussed me behind my back, planning what to say at family events, made everything clear. I spent the rest of that Saturday thinking, not crying, not calling friends, just thinking about what I'd learned and what I wanted to do next. Because here's what they don't understand. I'm doing all right. I earn decent money in IT. I have savings, my own apartment, my own life. I've helped them financially and practically for years because I believe that's what family does. Dad's birthday party was the following Sunday. I showed up with a gift, helped set up tables, talked to relatives, and played with Blake's kids, normal family stuff. But I listened differently now. When Denise joked I was the eternal bachelor, I smiled. When Blake asked if I'd ever grow up and buy a house, I laughed along. Inside, I thought about the garage conversation. They believe I need them, that I'm desperate for approval and show up like a dog begging scraps. What they don't realize is I came because I thought we actually cared about each other. I thought their criticism came from concern, not contempt. That night, I made practical decisions. Not out of anger, not impulsive, but about where to invest my time and energy going forward. If I was their failure project and their ongoing joke, I didn't want to keep participating in that dynamic. Over the next 3 weeks, I planned carefully. They expect me to keep showing up, helping, and being their reliable disappointment. They'd become comfortable with that arrangement. But I realized I don't need their approval anymore. I stopped needing it at some point. Without notice, what I mistook for loyalty was habit, and habits can change. I considered confronting them directly, asking for explanations. I thought about acting by reducing my availability so they'd wonder why I wasn't around. In the end, I decided I was done with both those approaches. I'm 34, have my own life, and I don't want to waste energy on people who mock me behind my back. It's strange how clear everything felt afterwards. For years I tried to earn their respect. Now I see the issue wasn't me not trying hard enough. They never considered me an equal family member. I was always their project, their disappointment, their cautionary tale. So I decided I'm not their project anymore. I'm not their joke. I'm not going to keep being the punching bag just because we shared DNA. Next week, Blake's daughter had a birthday party. They expected my usual show up with a gift, help set up. I thought about going. Honestly, I leaned toward staying home, not to make a point or stir drama, but because I'd rather spend my Saturday doing something that genuinely makes me happy. The more I reflected, the more I noticed how much of my life had been arranged around their expectations. Sunday dinners, parties, moves, babysitting, everything under the idea that family comes first and I owed them my time. What did I get in return? Criticism disguised as concern, jokes at my expense, and apparently people planning what to say about me when they thought I couldn't hear. That's not family, it's people taking advantage of how I was raised to tolerate their behavior. I decided I was done tolerating it. Not angrily, just done. Done pretending their opinions mattered, done arranging my life for their approval, done being available on demand while accepting crumbs. They can keep their Sunday dinners and family meetings where they critique me. I've got better things to do. Figure out what I actually want, instead of what they think I should want. I'll update if anything significant happens. Right now, I'm processing how the family dynamic I thought I knew was different from reality. There's a weird kind of relief in it. I don't need their approval to be happy. I needed to stop seeking it. Update 1. Blake's daughter's party happened, and things got more interesting. I tested my plan. I didn't show up, not to be petty, just to break the pattern. I texted Blake Saturday morning, saying I couldn't make it, had work, and would drop off a gift card later in the week. Polite, uncomplicated. My phone buzzed that afternoon. First Blake, then Denise, then Dad asking where I was, checking if I was okay, saying the party wasn't the same without me. That choice of words was telling, considering what I'd overheard. Blake called that evening asking if I was mad. I said I wasn't, just busy with projects. He kept probing, what projects, and said it was odd that I missed the party. When I calmly said sometimes work comes first, he paused and said that didn't sound like me. It hit me. They'd gotten used to me dropping everything for family. My absence felt wrong to them, not because they missed me as a person, but because I wasn't playing my expected role. The next day, Dad called, asking if someone had upset me, or if I had money or health problems. He couldn't accept that I might simply have different priorities. I told him I was fine and focusing on my own life. He went quiet and said he'd talk to me later. On Tuesday, Denise turned up unannounced at my apartment, worried, and fishing for why I'd missed the party. I told her I was reevaluating priorities, and she went defensive. Family should be my top priority. I'd regret pushing them away. I needed to think about what mattered. It sounded like a rehearsed script about how family should behave. What struck me was none of them asked if I'd overheard something, or if someone had said anything hurtful. They assumed I was spiraling and needed support, not that I might be distancing myself because of something I heard. They have a narrative where I'm the family member who needs guidance and assistance, someone who shows up because I need them emotionally and practically. The idea that I might choose distance based on how they actually feel didn't fit their story. Saturday, Blake texted asking if I'd come to Sunday dinner. I told him I'd let him know. He replied that the family missed me and wanted to ensure I was okay. They missed me after calling me worthless and their failure project. I am okay. Better than okay. The past weekend I did things I enjoy instead of sitting through another dinner where they masked mockery as concern. I worked on a programming project, went hiking Saturday morning, and caught up with friends from work. It was refreshing to step back and see how much mental energy I'd devoted to managing their expectations. Energy I can now use for myself. Wednesday evening, Blake and Seth showed up at my place, wanting to talk. They said they were confused by my behavior and worried I was pulling away for no reason. Seth observed I hadn't texted the way I used to. He was right. After hearing him joke about me being 34 and sweeping like a janitor, I stopped investing effort into our chats. When they asked what changed and what they'd done wrong, I thought about the phone call I'd overheard. I told them people grow and change, that I'd shifted priorities. Blake called it a phase and insisted family is permanent. Seth warned me not to let whatever bothered me ruin relationships. The conversation circled for an hour. They wanted to know what to fix so things could return to normal, but they weren't ready to examine how they'd treated me or what they'd said behind my back. Blake finally asked if someone had said something to upset me. I suggested they consider recent conversations they'd had. Maybe I'd overheard things I wasn't meant to hear. Seth's face changed first. As he tried to recall, Blake took longer. Then recognition crossed his eyes. Neither spoke for a long moment. When I told them I'd heard enough to understand how they felt, called their failure project worthless, good only for carrying boxes, they tried to reframe it. Seth said I'd misunderstood, that they were venting because they worried. Blake insisted they only talked about me because they wanted what was best. They kept saying I was taking things out of context. But there's no context where calling someone worthless is acceptable, or where laughing about someone begging for scraps of love is fine. They knew it. None of them could meet my eyes, while offering excuses. I thanked them for coming over but said I needed time to think. They left uncomfortable, new for me. Usually I leave family talks feeling bad. This time they looked bad. This morning Dad called, saying the family wanted a serious conversation this weekend. An intervention of sorts. I said I'd think about it. I'm curious what it will look like. Will they actually address their behavior, or will they ask me to return to accepting it? I've also made other changes. Blake asked me to babysit this weekend, something I used to do without question. I told him I had plans. He pressed, like I needed to justify not being available. I've been less responsive in the family group chat, still present, but not jumping to answer immediately. Denise called asking if my phone was broken because I hadn't replied about Mom's birthday planning. I'm not trying to hurt them or make them worry. I'm simply not prioritizing their needs above my own anymore. Apparently that's dramatic. They keep asking what they did wrong, but they're not ready to hear the answer. They want me to say it was nothing, that I was having a bad week, and everything can go back to how it was. They want to fix this by pretending I never heard what they actually think of me. But I can't unhear it. I can't pretend their mockery was concerned. This weekend's conversation should be revealing. I'm prepared for them to either acknowledge what they said and how it affected me, or to double down and insist I'm too sensitive. Based on everything so far, I expect the latter. I'll update after I see how it goes. For now, I'm processing how much different life feels when you stop trying to earn approval from people who decided you're not worth their respect. Update 2. The family intervention happened, and it was worse than I expected. They'd clearly coordinated. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at Dad's house, and they were waiting. Dad, Blake, Denise, Seth, and Mom. Mostly quiet in the corner. Everyone had talking points. Dad opened by saying they were concerned and wanted to understand what was wrong. Blake said I'd been different, pulling away, acting angry. When I asked what made him think I was angry, he said I wasn't acting like my usual self. I'd stopped being their punching bag who accepted whatever they dished out. Denise said bottling things up was unhealthy and we could work through it as a family. Seth said he missed our usual conversations. They spoke as if I were a problem to fix, rather than a person with valid reasons to change boundaries. Dad asked me to tell them what was wrong, so they could fix it. That's when I decided to lay it all out. I told them everything I'd overheard in the garage 3 weeks earlier. Every single word. I described Dad calling me worthless, Denise saying, "At least I still think they want me around," Blake comparing me to a dog begging for scraps, and Seth mocking my job, calling me a janitor. Their reactions were immediate and revealing. Blake insisted I'd misunderstood. Denise argued I was taking things out of context. Seth framed it as venting proof, he said, that they worry about me. Dad claimed families sometimes say things they don't mean when they're worried. Not one of them apologized or admitted their words were hurtful. Instead, they doubled down. Dad said they talked about me because they wanted what was best for me. Blake argued that if I were more open to advice, they wouldn't have to discuss concerns behind my back. Denise said the real issue was that I'd been eavesdropping and getting upset about conversations not meant for me. Then things escalated. Dad suggested I was proving their point, oversensitive, upset instead of listening, and trying to improve. Blake called my reaction victimhood in the name of help. Seth urged me to focus on intent, not the words. Denise told me to grow thicker skin if I wanted to stay part of a family that cared enough to be blunt. Listening to all this, I realized something important. They truly saw themselves as the victims. In their telling, I was the problem for refusing to accept their treatment. My response to their cruelty, they said, was the real issue, not the cruelty itself. So I asked a simple question. If they really thought I was worthless, why did they want me around at all? Why invite me to dinners and parties if I was such a disappointment? The silence that followed was loud. Dad tried to say I was twisting their words. Blake, more honest, said family is family. You keep someone around even if you don't approve of their choices. Denise said they loved me despite my flaws and sometimes had to talk about those flaws to figure out how to help. Seth said they weren't giving up on me even if I was giving up on myself. That's when the dynamic clicked for me. They keep me around because it comforts them to feel charitable, not because they respect me. They loved the idea of helping a screwed-up relative, not me as an individual. I told them I didn't need their pity or their help. I had my own job, apartment, savings, and friends. Dad called that pride that kept me from growing. Blake said I was stubborn, refusing guidance from those who know better. Denise accused me of being defensive instead of grateful. I asked one more question. What exactly should I be grateful for? What had they actually done for me lately beyond criticizing and mocking me behind my back? That's when the conversation turned ugly. Dad listed the times I'd been invited to family events, dinners, birthdays, holidays, as if attendance was a favor. Blake framed my babysitting as an opportunity to bond, not as me doing him a favor. Denise recited all the advice she'd given over the years. Seth claimed they'd always been there for me, but when I asked for a single specific example of meaningful support, he couldn't name one. They couldn't point to any real help they'd offered, but they could list dozens of things I'd done for them: moving furniture, babysitting, lending money, fixing computers, driving people to appointments. In their version, my help was just what a family member with nothing better to do should do. I told them I was done. Done with dinners where they made jokes about my life. Done with being available at everyone's convenience. Done pretending their criticism came from love rather than contempt. Dad warned I'd regret it. Blake accused me of burning bridges over nothing. Denise said I'd come crawling back once I realized how much I needed them. Seth said they wouldn't give up on me even if I gave up on them. Their framing was clear. Setting boundaries is equivalent to giving up on family. I stood up to leave. Dad asked where I was going. I said I was going home to the life I'd built without them. Blake insisted the discussion wasn't over. I told him it was. As I walked out, Mom finally spoke, hoping I'd reconsider, arguing family is all anyone really has. I told her calmly, maybe for some families, but not this one. The drive home surprised me. I expected sadness or guilt, but mostly I felt relief, like a weight I didn't know I carried had been lifted. Since then, my phone has been non-stop. Group texts about family events I'm ignoring, individual messages from family members, trying different approaches. Blake sent a long text about how families fight, but remain family. Denise left a voicemail, urging me not to let pride keep me from loved ones. Seth asked to grab coffee. Dad called twice. I didn't pick up. He left a message saying he wanted to explain that maybe they hadn't communicated well. But they still didn't get it. They assumed this was a phase of hurt feelings that would heal if they found the right words. They couldn't see that normal was the problem. Blake even came to my office asking to talk privately. I told him there was nothing to work out. I'd heard what he really thought of me and I was done pretending it didn't matter. He offered the usual brothers say stupid things when frustrated. We were only trying to help. I told him my life was fine and I didn't need their version of help. He said I'd regret cutting them off. I said they cut me off the day they decided I was their failure project. For a few minutes afterward, I felt guilty. Then I remembered their words and felt fine again. The mental space I've gained is enormous. I no longer spend evenings juggling calls and visits or censoring myself to avoid giving them ammunition. It's been 3 weeks since I attended a family dinner and I don't miss it. I've thought about why they behaved this way, and it seems to come down to control and superiority. As long as I'm the family screw-up, they get to feel good about their choices. My independence threatens that dynamic, so they keep me in that role. It's not about love, it's about maintaining their status as the successful members who magnanimously tolerate a failing relative. I'm done playing that role. They can find someone else to belittle. Tomorrow is Mom's birthday. I won't be there. I'll take myself out to dinner somewhere I actually want to be, with people who want me there. I'll update if anything major happens. But honestly, I think the story is mostly over. They showed me who they are. I believed them. Now I'm building a life without them in it. Final update. It's been about 2 months since I overheard the garage call, and a lot has changed. Mom's birthday came and went, just as I planned. I ate at that steakhouse I'd wanted to try, sat at the bar, talked to the bartender, and enjoyed the evening far more than I would have at a family gathering. My phone buzzed all night with family texts and calls. Dad left a voicemail saying they'd save me cake. The guilt trip was heavy, but I reminded myself they'd had chances to treat me with basic respect. A week later, Blake and Denise returned, saying they'd reconsidered their approach. Blake apologized for how I'd taken things, not for saying them. Denise suggested they might not have been as supportive as they should have been. Their apologies felt empty. Sorry I took things the wrong way, not sorry for hurting me. I told them apologies weren't enough. Calling someone worthless isn't an accident. Blake couldn't explain the difference between saying something in frustration and truly believing it. They wanted to default back to family as family, but I wasn't interested in working through anything with people who didn't respect me. Then something notable happened. Cousin Seth called with a real need. His computer crashed, and he lost files. He'd relied on me for tech help many times before. This time, I said no. He pleaded, saying it was urgent, and he couldn't afford a professional. I told him he'd need to take it elsewhere. He tried different angles, but I was done. His desperation was a stark reminder. They'd all grown used to relying on me because I always said yes. Realizing that I'd enabled a pattern of dependence was eye-opening. They mocked me for needing approval while being dependent on my help. They labeled me worthless, even as they relied on me to solve real problems. 2 weeks later, I ran into Blake at the grocery store. He asked casually if I'd babysit again. I said no, permanently. He was shocked. He tried the family speech. I cut him off and said families should treat each other with respect. He walked away confused. Yesterday, Dad called, the first direct call since the intervention. He sounded tired and admitted maybe they'd handled things poorly. He said he loved me, but hoped I'd realize family matters more than pride, and that when I was ready to apologize for cutting them off, they'd be willing to work things out. Apologize for setting boundaries, he suggested. I told him I wouldn't apologize for demanding respect. If he wanted a relationship, it had to be based on mutual respect, not obligation. He said he'd think about it and hung up. I'm not optimistic. I'll hear from him again. Their view remains fixed. I'll always be the relative who needs guidance, who should be grateful for their attention, regardless of how they treat me. I'm okay with that. These past 2 months have been the most peaceful I've felt in years. I no longer arrange weekends around family obligations. I spend more time with friends who enjoy my company, joined a Sunday hiking group, and I'm working on personal projects. The mental space this has created is incredible. I'm building a life that doesn't depend on being anyone's cautionary tale. That's the real update. I feel lighter, more present, and a lot less obligated. And it's the best thing that's happened in a long time. I hadn't realized how much energy I was spending managing their expectations and reactions, how often I censored myself around them to avoid giving them new ammunition for their private conversations about my shortcomings. Lately, I've been thinking about why they behave that way. It boils down to control and self-validation. They needed someone to look down on so their choices could feel justified. As long as I was the family screw-up, they felt successful by comparison. As long as I accepted their criticism and guidance, they felt wise and important. My independence threatens that setup. If I'm doing fine on my own, if I'm content with my choices and don't need their approval, what role do they have left? They can't tolerate the idea of not being necessary, so they try to draw me back with guilt and obligation, not because they miss me as a person, but because they miss the status of being the successful family members who tolerate a disappointing relative. I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not their project, their cautionary tale, or their source of self-righteousness. I'm just someone living my life on my terms, and that's exactly what I want. Looking back, I'm almost grateful I overheard the garage conversation, not because it felt good to learn what they really thought, but because it forced me to scrutinize relationships I'd accepted without question. It made me realize family isn't automatically sacred if those family members don't treat you with basic human decency. Some of you might say I'm being too harsh, that I should give them another chance, or try to mend things. I spent 34 years trying to earn their respect and approval. What I got back was mockery and contempt. I'm done trying to repair relationships with people who see me as fundamentally broken. This will probably be my last update, unless something major happens. I've said what I needed to say, and I'm ready to move on. Thanks to everyone who followed along and offered support in the comments. Your encouragement meant more than you know. If you're dealing with similar family dynamics, you don't owe toxic people your time and energy just because you share DNA. You deserve respect. If your family can't offer that, you have every right to build a life without them in it. It's scary at first, but it's also liberating. You can be happy without the approval of people who never truly approved of you.